Okay, well that's a good question. A lot of people don't know we live in a watershed. You know, everyone lives in a watershed. A watershed is an area of land for which water drains from it. So, and you know, we're in the Mississippi, Missouri River main watersheds with several smaller subsheds broken up with all the, like such as Kiefer Creek that discharges into Merrimack and discharges into the Mississippi River.
So I'm David Wilson. I work at East-West Gateway Council of Governments. I'm the senior manager for environment and community planning there. East-West Gateway is a regional planning agency that addresses issues in 8 counties that make up the core of the St. Louis metropolitan area. The Merrimack River is a significant river for the St. Louis region, not only because it's so close to St. Louis. I mean, something like 2/3 of the St. Louis region's population are within about a half an hour's drive of the Merrimack River, so it provides easy access for recreation, number one. It provides drinking water for 200,000 people in St. Louis County. And more than that, it's incredibly biodiverse. There are more than 125 species of fish, 47 species of mussels. It really has stature on the national scale.
What would you say is the significance of Kiefer Creek in terms of the Lower Merrimack and the St. Louis region?
Well, Kiefer Creek is a special tributary to the Merrimack, in part simply because Castlewood State Park is at the mouth of Kiefer Creek and on the Merrimack. And so you get thousands of people coming to that park and hiking, wading in the creek, swimming in the pools of the creek, swimming in the Merrimack River. It gets a lot of public use, a lot of public pressure on the park because of its popularity. And the creek then is an important resource for the park, of course. And it's important for us to think about how to both manage the park and the land around it so that that creek is as healthy as possible. We ranked land based on a number of criteria. How large is the contiguous forest? How well connected is it? How much natural space is in a river bottom? Where are the wetlands, etc. And then on a regional scale, we used a numbering system to prioritize, and you can, have, I think it's a 1 to 9 prioritization ranking that identifies the highest priority lands for conservation purposes.
Yes, I'm Bob Kress. I'm a professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at Washington University, and I've spent a lot of time studying local springs and rivers and creeks, and also the karst and caves of St. Louis County. And Kiefer Creek watershed's a very special place. It's got more forest for a populous county than most of our other watersheds. It's less developed, has more natural flow, a lot of beautiful karst features, including a beautiful Kiefer Spring right here. And we got perennial flow in this watershed and a lot of protected land just downstream of us, particularly Castlewood State Park, one of our really beautiful parks in the county. It's almost 3 square miles. And upstream there's bluebird parks and smaller protected parcels. So this watershed's pretty well left alone compared to the metropolitan area.
The area was really quite different and it wasn't near as developed. I used to ride my bike down Kiefer Creek Road all the way, and there were practically no houses on Kiefer Creek Road in this whole valley down here. And all that changed over the next 15, 20 years to many subdivisions, and really changed probably the nature of the entire watershed by all the development that occurred there. So it changed things down here too as a result.
I think that meeting at Powder Valley, I was talking about the amount of fish species that used to be found in the creek, and you just don't see the amount of fish like you used to either. And there'd be in schools of this type of fish called a hog sucker. That's like a bottom dwelling fish, like this big.
Yeah.
I mean, 20 or 30 of them just,
scooting along.
Yeah, it was incredible. We'd have our nets, we'd catch them and let them go and stuff.
Do you think the flow has changed?
Yeah, I mean, one thing, like I was telling you at that meeting, that I remember were more deeper holes, and now it just seems to be, I mean, there's still some good holes, but now a lot of it, there's long stretches, you know, of shallow, you know, maybe a foot or so deep.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've noticed a lot more algal blooms too.
Yeah, no doubt.
We're seeing some of the impacts of development on this watershed. Again, they're subdued compared to a typical St. Louis County watershed, but there still are obvious things we can see. More development, be it yards and certainly roads and rooftops, shed water more quickly to streams, there's less infiltration in the ground, there's less evapotranspiration by the trees. And those things do tend to increase runoff by a lot smaller factor than people normally assume, but they do change that amount. The most important thing is that those changes accelerate the delivery of runoff to the watershed after it rains. And there's just faster flow.
Slopes. Steep slopes are really important in any watershed because the steeper a slope, the more rapidly the rain is going to run off. And in a steep slope where land is cleared for development, you can get tremendous amounts of erosion very quickly. So steep slopes typically are not ideal places for development, and they're areas where, you know, development can have a major impact on water quality.
You can see evidence for flash flooding all around us. For one thing, the cobble size is too large for a creek this size. It's pretty coarse gravel. This should actually be more fine material. And in creeks that are really impacted by flash floods, you got boulders everywhere, just really big stuff. But this stuff is too coarse. You can see evidence for widening of this stream channel. And there's a bunch of roots showing over here. There is widening and erosion, and there probably is down cutting of the channel, entrenchment of the channel. The floodplain's probably probably at least 10 feet over my head here, and the stream bottom should be a lot closer to that than it is. So there's down cutting, widening, erosion that's stripped off a lot of the fine material. That's all evidence of high energy water.
Comparing Kiefer Creek to some of the other creeks in the area is really kind of interesting because it really does seem to correlate with the amount of development there. Grand Glaze Creek, which is nearby and runs down into the Merrimack, and Fishpot Creek, which runs down into the Merrimack, just a little bit downstream from here, and Kiefer Creek are all urban type streams now. But Kiefer Creek has higher quality water right now than Fishpot Creek does. Fishpot Creek has deteriorated quite a bit in the last 10 years or so, and Grand Glaze has too. But they still have a lot of organisms in them. They're not completely dead, but they don't have these marks of high quality water in them that Kiefer Creek still has. And Kiefer Creek still has a lot of watershed that is undeveloped, and a lot of trees and forested areas and field areas that do a lot of filtering of the water coming in. Some places like Fishpot Creek now has development on both shores all the way up and down it mostly, and it's pretty tough to keep that environment natural, you know. And Grand Glaze has a similar type problems.
Or like a little side thing, and it's not even, or something that no one even really like, and then for a group like ours to try to do it, it's like this huge ordeal, and nobody knows. I mean, they do have a ton of capabilities and power to.
There's a bunch of them that aren't necessarily harmful to us.
Yeah.
But the idea is when you see large counts, it's a good indicator that there's other things around that you don't want. Nevertheless, these coliforms tend to be high when the rivers and waters are turbid. And if the water looks muddy, well, bacteria or particulates too. And I don't know whether they're living on the particles or what, but when you see a bunch of stuff stirred up, and the creeks are running brown, you can be pretty much assured in an urban area that E. coli is going to be very high. But surface runoff's the worst. Of course, you got all kinds of pollution: road oils, road salt, just animal feces, detergents, antiseptic leaks, just all this stuff just collects and delivers to the stream channel. There's no filtering, and so surface runoff is very bad water quality.
So you have animal.
Non-point source pollution. Well, back up. I'll talk about point source pollution first because that was first addressed by the Clean Water Act. Industrial activities, such as like Anheuser-Busch here in town, chemical companies, they have specific what's called NPDES permits, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits, issued by the state that they have to meet for that stormwater runoff. So non-point source pollution is from everything else, from just general construction sites, the runoff from that, the post-construction runoff from that site, such as from the parking lot, the roof, from that site, from residential property owners, the general runoff from that. So anything else that's not covered under an NPDES permit.
Department of Conservation has a fisheries division that has looked at fish populations in a number of tributaries of the Merrimack. And a number of years ago, about in the late 90s, the Fisheries Division actually did sampling of fish species from the mouth of the Merrimack at the Mississippi upstream, hitting major smaller tributaries all the way out past Eureka. And what they discovered is in the first 40 miles of the river between the mouth of at the Mississippi going upstream as far as Eureka, none of those tributaries in the lower river, none of the smaller tributaries had any more than 13 species of fish. When you got out to LaBarque Creek, just south of Eureka in Jefferson County, there are 42 species of fish today in recent samples. And in Fox Creek, just west of that, 44 miles, there are 44 species of fish. That would have been what they expected in a healthy stream, anywhere downstream of those streams that have 13, 10, 5. One only had 3 species of fish that were found by the fisheries biologist. The one thing that all those streams have in common is they all are in areas that have been significantly developed with subdivisions, with businesses, with lots of roads, lots of pavement, a lot of rooftops. So while we don't have definitive data that links development to decline in fish species, we can pretty well say once you get beyond the heavily developed areas, the fish populations are greatly increased over what we find in those areas that are more developed in the lower Merrimack.
Well, as increased development occurs, so does the amount of impervious surfaces. Impervious surfaces include buildings, parking lots, and roads, and ecosystems generally degrade as impervious surfaces increase, and impervious surfaces do not absorb water at all. So stormwater hits the ground and it flows off these impervious surfaces, and along the way it's going to pick up pollutants such as sediments, motor oil, fertilizers, pesticides, pet waste, and trash, and it's going to carry that directly into the city sewer system, which eventually is discharged straight into our rivers and our streams. And non-point source pollution is the #1 water quality problem in the United States today.
We've done water quality monitoring of this particular creek. It does have high bacterial levels after flood events, rainfall events. Some of those are very bad by county-wide standards, and I don't entirely know what the problem is or where that's coming from. This creek also has high chloride levels that impact the aquatic life in the winter. That's coming from road salt applications for the most part. Other than that, the water is actually pretty nice. And there's a lot of things that live here. and in the water.
Have you tested the spring itself?
Sure, chloride's a big issue. Something that's not unique to St. Louis County or Kiefer Creek. Wherever there's roads, development, and snow, chances are if there's a stream nearby, it's going to exceed chloride concentrations in winter months because of salt. Salt is the primary component used for winter de-icing by municipalities and road crews. And so it's an issue. We've seen it here for many years during the winter months. It exceeds water quality limits under state regulations.
Many of the bridges in our county are getting replaced because they're being taken out by flash floods. And that accelerated delivery of water is not natural. It's something that has a lot to do with development. In particular, new developments tend to just collect the water from the gutters and send them into big pipes and deliver it to the creeks immediately. It should take a much longer period of time. So we tend to get too high of flood peaks in all these creeks.
He was working for McDonnell Douglas at the time. He's a microbiologist,